What's up, my little nerds? Today we are going to be discussing another pre-Socratic philosopher. We are nowhere near finished yet, just so that you know. So if you are still here, it's the end of the weekend. This is our 4th episode. If you guys are still here, we do appreciate it. We're trying to make these as short and as easy to follow as possible. So thank you guys so much for sticking around. So for today's episode, we are going to be discussing the very famous Anaxagoras. So Anaxagoras, he was actually from this place, but we're just going to put it on a map. It's just much easier to do it this way. But it's basically in Asia Minor, and he was born around 499 BC. He then later moved to Athens, probably in around like 480, 479, probably somewhere around that time. Either way of the dates, either way of all that kind of stuff, because obviously we hear from other people, we know that he certainly wrote one book. Anything else that's credited to be written by Anaxagoras, that's not the single book that we have, that's not reliable, okay? That's not reliable. We don't like any of that kind of stuff. No, it's just the one book as far as we're aware, as far as other philosophers are aware, he wrote the one. There are lots of things that are credited to be his, but it's the idea that surrounds the Nous, spelled like this. So the idea of the Nous even, that's his main idea, and that's what he puts forward in his book. So let's step it back like 10 steps or something, and we'll explain where this came from. So the idea can be interpreted in like 1,000,005 different ways. This is why it is so famous even today among the pre-Socratics, among Greek philosophy in general. The reason why people know the Nous is because holy shit, we can say it's like 500 different things. It's mad. So even now we're still translating it differently, but either way the basic idea is that the universe started as a blob. Yes, we're going this far back. So his premise is that the universe starts as a blob. It starts as just a blob of goop, basically. And within this existed infinites. So everything that existed within it was equally infinitely large, yet infinitely small at the same time. But it also had all of the opposites in it. So hot and cold, big and small, those things all existed together in this big sort of goop that is the universe. Now, because the infinites exist together, because things are both infinitely large and infinitely small at the same time, that's how the universe works, it therefore means that you can't have more of something and less of something. We'll get into that a bit later in the video because there's an idea that pops off of that, kind of has a little like branch on the side of it that better explains it. But for the moment, you can't have different levels of this infinite stuff, okay? It's all infinitely large and infinitely small at the exact same time. This therefore means that everything is dependent on each other in order to survive. Everything that is opposite is dependent on the other to exist in order for it to exist in its own right. So hot depends on cold to exist because without cold, hot wouldn't exist and vice versa. So everything that is opposite, everything that exists in this goop, they are dependent, but this also means that they're then equal. So it means that there's nothing that's more important than the other because everything is needed for either ends of the seesaw. And this is actually based off of Zeno. We'll discuss him next week. Zeno, however you say it in a Greek accent. But it's actually based off of him because he said that you can't reduce anything to sheer nothingness. And so this is all part of the same school of thought as that. Next week, though. Hold on 5 seconds, guys. So that's the base of the argument. Okay, we're about to get into the finer details of the argument because the finer details basically suggest that, yes, that's how the Earth, the world, the universe exists. It exists on opposites. It exists on everything being infinitely small, infinitely large. Everything's equal. Everything is dependent. That's how that works. But in order for that structure to work, Anaxagoras suggests that there must be something that has control over this without being part of it. Okay, so he says that therefore it must be unmixed. This higher thing must be unmixed from the mixture, this weird mixture, must be unmixed, it must untouch it, but it must completely understand it. It must completely understand how it works, how these intricacies work, how the seesaw effect works. It needs to understand this without being a part of it. So this thing that he puts forward that must therefore, it must not be influenced but understand it. It must be made up of different matter as to not be dragged into it, but understand the matter. Actually, does he say it could be part of the same matter? I'm not really sure. But either way, this thing that understands the universe and understands how all that works, that is what he calls the mind. Now, the way that he calls the mind, he uses the word nous, which is what I discussed at the beginning of this. So nous is spelled like this. It's like the we version in French, right? It's spelled the same way. So that nous, by the way, has no link. Don't try and go into it in the French because then you're imposing a modern understanding on an ancient understanding. Anyways, that's just my little note just there. But this nous kind of operates kind of like your brain. So in the way that your brain governs your body, right? So he doesn't use this example, but in the way that your brain, it kind of puts things into motion, right? So I couldn't move this, I couldn't do this if my brain wasn't saying, yo, you should move and you should move and you should do this and you should tense or whatever parts of my body do that. Without my brain doing that, the arm couldn't do that. And in the same way, there needs to be a mind, a nous, a brain for the universe that says, hey, you need to be cold and you need to be hot and you need to do this and you need to do that in order for everything to work in harmony. Therefore, this cosmic nous, cosmic, that's the important word. So he calls it cosmic nous as to not get confused with your brain. So this cosmic nous must be all-knowing. It must be all-understanding. This cosmic nous must be superior in power. It must not be mixed with this mixture of the universe, but it must completely understand this mixture of the universe. It must be able to create everything and yet remain completely unmixed and of a completely different substance. That's the nous, and that is what the universe needs, kind of like, well, the universe, kind of like we need this whole thing. Basically, the universe is an extension of your brain and your body. It's now the cosmic nous and the universe. So that's the basic idea, but the nous is not only, the cosmic nous, the cosmic mind, is not only, it's unmixed, it's doing all the stuff that I've just listed, but it's also the thing that sets everything in motion. And not only does it set everything in motion, but it preserves motion. So in the same way that, it can see cold, it can see something that's infinitely small, it can see something that's infinitely large, or whatever it happens to be. Sorry, I have an itch on the side of my ribcage. Ow, bad. Oh, it's my tag. There it is. So the nous, though, needs to preserve the motion of everything being infinitely large, infinitely small, cold, hot. It needs to keep those in balance. So it needs to set them in motion. It needs to say, you're now hot, you're now cold, but then also monitor it and make sure, okay, the minute that you warm up, you cool down. So it preserves the motion in order for this whole weird big globe of the universe to keep moving. Now, how does he then link the cosmic nous to us? This is the interesting part of the argument. So he says the cosmic nous therefore has control over anything with a soul. That is how he connects it to, yes, the cosmic nous controls the universe, he controls the infinites, he controls the hot, he controls the cold, he also controls souls. Doesn't matter the size, doesn't matter the scale, if you have a soul, the cosmic nous can control you. However, in saying that it has control in the sense of how people work and how people function, there is a higher power in that sort of way. His nous, is like God, basically, if you didn't get that thus far. But in saying that, he does suggest that even though it has control, it doesn't suggest that the nous arranges anything. It doesn't suggest that the nous orders anything. So even though it controls it in the sense that it monitors the motion, it doesn't order, it doesn't do any of that kind of stuff. It simply makes sure that everything is still working. So in the sense that, if we apply that to people, in the sense of like, okay, well, it's not going to control you walking down the street, but if you're doing this action, it will make sure that, okay, well, that other thing with the soul is over here, basically. And that is the link, because our brain is a nous, the cosmic nous. Brain nous, cosmic nous, soul nous, brain and soul basically nous, and cosmic nous, all of the same material. So it's all controlled by the cosmic nous. Now, remember how I said about the infinitely large, infinitely small? So we're going to talk about that for a little bit right now. When I say a little bit, I mean like 2 sentences. And basically, there's this theory that's put forward by Anaxagoras in his writing that attaches onto that, where it's called the principle of predominance. Now, this theory suggests predominance, priority. This is kind of where it gets fuzzy, because it even though everything like blood, it technically is, unlimited and is completely, unmonitored, infinite. That's the word I was looking for. Even though blood is that way, humans are that way, dogs are that way. What it suggests is that in different beings, in different, sort of souls, that we have a predominance, we have a priority. So that's why humans are made up the same way as dogs, is because, there's a priority in the formation of a dog, which then it gets certain features that come out of, let's say, the human or whatever. Like there are things that it will get that I will not get, then I'll get more of this, and then the dog will get less of that. And so that way everything is still balanced. It's just redirected into different places. Predominance, principle of predominance. And that's how everything is equally large and equally small at the same time, because it all exists just at different levels everywhere. And so as long as those levels are maintained, which is what the nous does, as long as those levels are maintained, then that way everything works in harmony. And that's how the Nous does its job. So I know that these are getting increasingly more complicated. Completely aware, that's the point of philosophy. So that's why we're gonna keep just doing the basic idea of these philosophers. Now, if you guys are lost at any point throughout this video, if you were lost, please write it in the comments and I will get back to you, because these are difficult. I wanna make sure that we get the understanding down first before we then move on to the analysis. If you guys are interested in that, then please holler at me as well in part 2 of your comment. Let me know. And if you liked this, if you like this whole series though, and you want us to keep going with it, hit the like button so that I know. And I know to keep uploading these, and even when we're done, we will figure out a way to keep adding these onto the channel even. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for checking out Anaxagoras. If you can remember one thing about Anaxagoras, then just remember that it's Anaxagoras and he made his Nous. That's about it. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will be seeing you next Friday. We'll be doing 3 episodes a week for the next couple of weeks, just to pound out these guys, just to keep it really nice and light and easy and fun. We'll be pounding out more of these episodes, then that way after we can get on to some more fun things. So cheers guys for tuning in, and we will be seeing you next week with more pre-Socratic philosophers. See you then.